Good morning, everyone. This is a joint committee session of our Planning, Housing, and Economic Development Committee and the Health and Human Services Committee to discuss a critically important topic, to receive an update on the COVID rent assistance and current situation with rent assistance and evictions, and most importantly here, the efforts of our county agencies in trying to provide support for families and seeing how the council may be able to help. But also getting a firsthand account of what's happening on the ground. And I will say that all of my colleagues and I have a very strong sense of what is happening on the ground because we each continue to receive heartbreaking and incredibly complex and challenging constituent calls from families that are undeniably in crisis. And there is the misnomer that people are choosing not to return back to work simply because of an unemployment check, which is definitely not the case. We know there are multiple layers. We also know, as we will hear more in depth in just a moment or two, that the level of complexity of these calls is significant, and each one is taking a significant amount of time to try and address the underlying issues that are leading to the evictions and rental payment challenges that families are facing in the first place. We also know that this has been an overwhelming process, and we all agree that this has to be our highest priority and is tremendously urgent. I do want to thank the Department of Health and Human Services in particular, who's been tremendously responsive to our office and in response to constituent calls that we've received. And we will hear an update from them shortly. This is hard work, and I know they are working literally around the clock to address the complex needs of our families. With that, I'll yield to you, Chairman Reamer, to make some opening comments, and then I will ask Ms. McMillan to tee us up and then introduce the speakers this morning.
Thank you, Chair Albornoz. Part of the origin of this was concern about the pace of distribution of the rental assistance funding. And, my understanding is now at this point we've appropriated as much as $85 or so million. And I think we just need to get a sense of the pace of distribution and what the timeline is to work our way through it. And there have been questions asked about various criteria. I think we will hear a bit more about that today for how the county is allocating these funds. We certainly have received some requests from HOC that hopefully have been worked through, but as we are facing the upcoming, expiration of the emergency orders, I think it's even more important that we have a real handle on how these funds are getting out the door and reaching those who are most in need. So appreciate this briefing today. Thank you, and let's get into it.
Thank you, Chairman Reamer. I should also note, and once again, thank our federal partners, and in particular, the President, who has made these funds available for us to be able to provide. There is obviously no way that the county would have been able to provide the level of support that we are currently in the form of rental assistance on our own. And so we do want to thank our federal and state partners for making this possible. Joining us this morning on the panel will be Dr. Raymond Kroll, Director of HHS, Amanda Harris, the Chief of Services to End and Prevent Homelessness, Alana Bronda, the Deputy Chief, Asim Nagam, Director of the Department of Housing and Community Affairs, Frank Damaris, Deputy Director of DHCA, Rosie McCrary Moody, the Acting Chief Acting Chief of the Housing Division of DHCA, will also be joined by Captain Robin Lewis, Commander of the Criminal and Civil Division of the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office, and Frank Vitale, the Chief and Supervising Attorney of Maryland Legal Aid, the Montgomery County Office. So Ms. McMillan, if you can tee this up for us, and if there's anything that Chairman Reamer and I missed that we want to make sure we highlight before we get into the presentations.
No, I think you touched on a lot of the critical points. I think it would be best to start the session with the update from DHHS, which will talk to you about the current round of funding. I do want to remind everyone that the council and the executive did do earlier rounds of funding. Very early in the pandemic, the county appropriated $2 million right away out of concern. We also appropriated $20 million out of our CRF funds. So the council was not slow to act on this effort. And now what DHHS is working with is the $59 million that has been appropriated thus far. The $31 million came directly from Treasury, and the $28 million that came through the state. Those are both in this current program that use the application that is up online. So they are working through that funding. But I think it is really important to remember that we've already been trying to get rent assistance out the door to folks who have been impacted by COVID. Another thing about today is that these programs are for households that have been impacted by COVID. We know there are also other people in crisis for other reasons, but this briefing is about the rent assistance and the protections under the CDC order and the governor's order that relate to people who have been impacted by COVID. So I think after you hear from DHHS and DHCA about where we are with moving the rental assistance out, then we can hear from Captain Lewis and from Mr. Vitale about what they're seeing in the courts and in the sheriff's office related to actual evictions and eviction process, and the work that the sheriff's office is doing collaboratively with DHCA and DHHS to really try to help the county do targeted outreach to people who may be in danger of eviction. And so with that, I would turn it over to Dr. Kroll for any opening comments and then for the presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Linda. Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be with you all again this morning. As you all heard earlier this week at the full council session, the issue of rental assistance, eviction prevention, homelessness is part of HHS's larger work around recovery. It is probably at the top of our list of things that we're working on to promote recovery from both the pandemic and the economic hardships that have befallen people in the last year and a half. Regarding rental assistance program, the COVID rental relief program, over the next several years, there's a total of about $111 million in rental assistance, and that is COVID related, that has a long tail to it that will be available to us from the federal level until September of 2025. That speaks to a recognition of how long there's some sense that this problem is going to be with us. This is going to be a building problem and a sustained problem for some period of time as people get back on path. This current round of funding, just to be clear, is the federal government has required that we have 65% of it spent by September 21, a target that we will meet or exceed as we go forward, as you'll see when you hear from Amanda and Alana. The money does recognize that this is a long-term event. We recognize that there are some concerns about the end of the CDC and the state moratorium on evictions and what that means. And you hear things like tsunami of evictions, et cetera, coming across, that are being surfaced and voiced around the community. You'll hear a little bit about that today, I think, and you'll get a sense of what lies ahead and what we're doing to try to address that now and how we'll move forward together to make that a non-reality. Historically, evictions are about 8%, only about 8% of the filings for eviction actually lead to an eviction. So don't know if that will remain the same, but we do know that of all the thousands of filings, most of them do not result in an eviction. They get resolved in a lot of different ways, and hopefully you'll hear a little bit about that today. The average timeline for evictions is about 12 weeks. And at this point, the courts are open and hearing cases twice a week for about 120 evictions cases a day. 70% of those are being dismissed, and the rest are being dealt with in a number of different ways. I think the thing that you'll hear from us today is that we are working at every stage of the process to help. By putting out this information and this funding up front, we give people a chance to take action and apply before any eviction proceedings begin, all the way through online applications, staff in the court to try to help folks as they come into court, to the posting of red and whites and letting folks know that there is still some help available, even at the point when there's an eviction notice that has been posted on the door. There is a timeline that you'll hear about a little bit today in terms of how long it takes from a judgment for eviction to actual eviction that gives us windows of opportunity, and we're seizing every one of those windows to minimize the number of people who actually end up facing eviction. The Treasury has given us really clear guidelines, and Amanda will share some of those to hopefully clarify some of how this funding can be used and can't be used, and what we have to collect in terms of information that limit this to COVID-related arrearages and challenges with payment of rent. There are some things that this funding will not cover, and there are some folks who are maybe facing eviction that this funding does not apply to, and they're not eligible for it. But we do have other programs, and so when people contact us, it's not just that you're not eligible for this. It's let's see what else we might be able to do to help you to stave off eviction. I think the sad piece of this, and I'll wrap up this way, is that we will not be able to stave off all evictions. There are some that are going to come that are not COVID related, where the arrearage is too great and where we have to help folks do other things. Our goal along the way is to prevent people from becoming homeless wherever we can, and when people do become homeless for whatever reason, to get them rapidly rehoused, as Councilmember Glass, I'm sure, is aware. The goal is to try to address this challenge at every step along the way. Longer term, I think we have some not related to this conversation, but we have some larger challenges about affordable housing, and I'm hoping that our colleagues over in DHCD will have a chance to talk a little bit about that at some point, and how we've managed to make housing more affordable for our residents, as well as give them greater resources to be able to cover their rent and reduce the rent burden on everyone that has a need in the county. So with that. We can't prevent every addiction, but we will do what we can. And regarding pace of this, I know there's some concerns about the pace, and I think Amanda will talk to us about the pace. You'll see that we started slow. If you go back to testing and vaccination, this is a pattern that we start slow, we do this, and we build up and ramp up, and we very quickly get to the point where we are leading the pack in terms of our response. This will follow that same pattern, I have no doubt. The team is working to try to make this a reality for us, to make this work as fast and as quickly as we can. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amanda to talk us through where we are on the process, and look forward to a hearty discussion.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Kroll, and thank you for your remarks. We are working as quickly as we can. I do think it is important to highlight that there is some time. It does take a while for evictions to be processed, but we fully recognize that doesn't relieve the anxiety of people that are facing eviction. So that is also part of our work, is to do some of that, reducing anxiety and providing some level of confidence that we are going to get to folks and be able to provide some assistance. So I do have a slide deck. I'm going to pull that up. Give me just one moment. Okay, great. So before I get into the meat of it, I do just want to remind us all that we had a severe lack of affordable housing in the county pre-pandemic. So there are a lot of households that are in need, and that number has just exploded with the pandemic. So 27% of all renters are severely housing burdened, meaning that they're paying more than half of their income in rent. That's over 30,000 households. 21% of all households are making less than $35,000. And there are more than 11,000 households that are in overcrowded housing situations. So the need is great. This chart just gives you a breakdown of the various funding that has been made available for eviction prevention. It's a total of $119 million. With those funds, we do estimate that we'll be able to serve 12,600 households. So need is huge. Although this is a lot of money, it still is not enough to help everyone that may be behind or may be struggling. So it's really important for us to target those resources to those that are most at risk. I also just want to say thank you to council and to county executive and to all of us for starting this process very early. We started eviction prevention and rent relief 2 months after the pandemic started, so well before many other communities were even thinking about that. So I think we should all take some pride in that fact. I also do want to point out we do have some additional CDBG funds that we are working with DHCA and HOC to target the CDBG money to HOC properties and perhaps some other affordable housing developers. We've heard their concerns and their need, and we want to make sure that we have a program that is specifically tailored to them. So just a bit more about kind of our overarching philosophy. So as I said, need is great. We only can serve a certain amount. So we do want to make sure that we're targeting resources to those that are most at risk of homelessness. So as a reminder, we did use local data to create that homeless prevention index that identified high need census tracts. So we have used that to prioritize households that are living in those census tracts, and also to be more laser focused on our outreach efforts so that we're ensuring that we are reaching the hardest to serve communities. It's never been an eligibility criteria because we know that there are other people who are in need that don't live in those census tracts, but it has helped us to kind of really zero in on the communities with the greatest need. The other thing I just want to talk about is that we do have to find this balance between efficiency and speed and equity and access. We don't want to do a first come, first serve. We know that programs like that, the people that have the bandwidth, the resources to be able to submit their document in a timely way, have all their documentation ready, are not necessarily those households that are most in need. So we've got to figure out a way to make sure that we're not leaving people behind. So, you know, we do have our online application portal. We spent a lot of time making adjustments based on the lessons learned from our previous round. People can check their status. It's a little easier to navigate. So we have made some improvements there. Language accessibility was really important, so the application is available in multiple languages. We also have staff, bilingual staff that can assist people with completing their application. We also recognize that not everyone has internet access. There are literacy issues, there are other language issues, so we have made it possible for people to call us and we can complete their application over the phone. And as of today, we've completed more than 1,500 applications over the phone. And then the other thing is that we are doing a really in-depth review of each case. The application, although we have made improvements, it is still sort of complicated and people sometimes don't enter information correctly. The biggest issue is the income. So instead of putting their monthly income, they'll put their annual income. So their annual income will show up as $400,000. We know that they're not making $400,000. So rather than just denying those applications on face value, we actually go in and make sure that we review it, that we're talking to the tenant. We want to try and make people eligible, not just check them off and move on. So Alana is going to talk in a minute about where we are, but I do just want to talk a little bit about the status of homelessness. So all of these efforts are to make sure that homelessness doesn't increase in the community. So just to give you a report on where we're at right now, if these programs are actually having an impact on homelessness. So yes, they do seem to be working. This chart here shows you our family homelessness inflow versus outflow. So we're looking at the number of families that enter the homeless continuum each month compared to the number of housing placements that we can make. And you'll see over the last year, we have been able to connect more families to permanent housing each month than we have coming in. And that remains steady. We've had the lowest number of families in our system. I will say over the last couple of weeks, it started to creep up a bit, but we have housing resources available for all of them. Now, on the single adult side, it's a slightly different story. In the beginning of the pandemic, we were seeing a significant increase in single adults entering our shelter system, and we did not have the housing resources to be able to keep up. It was a real struggle, and so we kind of looked at, well, what else can we do? Is there an opportunity to use some of these federal resources for eviction prevention to actually help families and individuals exit from homelessness? And we can, that is allowable. We were able to use the CRF funds. We can use ERAP funds for this as well, and some local money. So beginning in this fall, we really ramped up with some different programs. Rapid Resolution, our Exit Bonus program. We also made use of our Emergency Solutions Grant for rapid rehousing. So you'll see over the last 6 months, we have been able to increase the outflow, and that is actually exceeding our inflow. Okay, I am going to hand it over to Alana now, and she will continue.
You're saying there are more people getting housed than becoming homeless. This would be like a net housing outcome at this point.
Correct.
The number's so much lower now of inflow than it was a year ago.
That's correct. Yes. Now there still is a lot of people, so it's going to take us a while to get caught up and to actually see a significant reduction, but we're on the right track.
So thank you, Amanda. I'll take it from here and just, okay, so where are we, right? With all those efforts that we are putting in, where are we? So if you can just forward to the next slide. So I think important to qualify where we are is thinking about what we have done and what are some of the challenges that we have worked through over these last couple of months. As Dr. Crowell mentioned, every program needs a ramp up and needs that time to really get up to speed. And this is what we have been working with over the last couple of times. So Treasury has changed its guidance 5 times. Each of those times has required us to make adjustments to our internal policies, to retrain staff, to reconfigure parts of the application so that we can actually comply with reporting requirements of Treasury. We are hoping that this last change is their final change. It just came out on June 30th. So hopefully we are in the groove now and can keep on moving. Some things to know in terms of the application process itself. So as Amanda mentioned, we did move to a new online application system that allows us to the applicants to check their status, allows us to do the case management within that application, allows the landlord and the tenant information to be combined in a way that is both impactful on the front end and very supportive for us on the back end to process. But there are some limits in terms of guidance from the Treasury that make the application process just a little complicated. Self-certification is a last offense. So it is on us to pursue any other, whether it's income, rent ledgers, any formal documentation for any of the required areas. The Treasury also has a lot of emphasis on ensuring that there is no duplication of benefits. And given that we ran a program previously already, some of our local jurisdictions have been running their own small programs, or some of our nonprofits have been providing assistance. The state has its Maryland Assisted Housing Fund. There is a lot of work on us to ensure that we are accounting for each of those months and the assistance provided. And we do have to assign our assistance to a specific month, whereas previously we would, we gave $4,000, and whether it covered arrears or provided a credit, we were able to do that. We now must say that, this payment of $1,500 is for your rent from June 2020 that you didn't pay. It has to be very concrete and specific like that. So it just takes a little bit of time to work through these ledgers. Every property keeps their ledgers differently, and so we are navigating, pulling out those rent charges and payments that the client may have made. And so it just puts a little bit more pressure, I would say, on the team to make sure that we are complying, because the last thing we want is to risk Treasury trying to say, you didn't do this right, and thinking about reclaiming any of the funds. There is also limits on the assistance. We can only provide assistance for up to 12 months of arrears and up to 3 months of perspective with the ERA1 funds. when we move into the ERA2 funds, we'll be able to provide an additional 3 months of prospective assistance if we are capped out. I think what's really important to note about that also is because of the way Treasury has divided it, that it's 12 months of arrears and only 3 months of prospective. When we have households coming in who only actually are behind 1 month, we're actually potentially leaving some money on the table. So it's also part of that fine balance that we're trying to find about the speed that we move versus the ability to try to leverage more funds for a household, because what we have seen is on average, we're actually only providing 5 months of arrears assistance to households. So there are many households that are coming to us who are just a couple of months behind. And again, we can only provide them those, on average 5 months of arrears payments and 3 months of perspective. We can't go forward more with perspective at this point. We also need to ensure that we try to engage the landlord. Initially, Treasury actually had that you had to give the landlord 14 days to respond. They've reduced that now to a 5-day response period. But it is on us to ensure that we do a minimum of 3 outreach attempts to the landlord to try to encourage them to complete that application and engage with us in the process before we can move a grant forward. So we definitely have some where the tenant has provided everything that we need, and we're kind of just waiting for that, the clock to run out so we can put it into for the benefit. So given all of that, again, we have been working really hard to train all the staff. They've, as Dr. Crowell mentioned, they're working around the clock, weekends, evenings. I am shocked every time I send out an email on my odd hours and I get one back 2 minutes later. And so, we are working to do this, and this is where it has led us. If you don't mind going to the next slide. So this is as of Monday, we have put out 6.64 million. That was an increase over the previous week. And I would note that the previous week was not a full week because we had the July 4th observed during that week. I do want to note, because this is such an ever-evolving number, that as of this morning, we are already at just shy of 7.7 million. So it is a number that is constantly, as you can see, the team is working on ramping that up and constantly increasing and going up. There's over another 100+ households in just the 3 days so far this week who have had checks issued to them. So as you can see, there was a large push of applications that came in those first, 3-4 weeks that the application portal was open. And we are working through that. As Amanda noted, we are not prioritizing though by first come, first serve. We're really trying to target those in need. So there is a place on the application for individuals to note that they have an active eviction proceedings against them, whether that's at the stage of having a court hearing date, a judgment, or a red and white. And so we have worked to process through all of those applications first, in light of knowing, especially when we first started, the CDC order was scheduled to expire even earlier than it was. It is still scheduled to expire at the end of this month, and then the governor's order will expire August 15th. So we have been working really hard to make sure that anyone who is eligible for this program in any stage of an eviction proceedings has access to these funds before the sheriff would be coming out, and we will continue to move that upstream as we get through more and more of the cases. I'm not sure if Frank or Captain Lewis will mention, but there was also the courts had kind of what we call the rocket docket, where they just went through hundreds upon hundreds of cases a day, and so there was a flood of cases initially, and so we're working through those. Every case that we are aware of where the household has identified to us, whether in the application or has come to us later and emailed us and said, I just got this court hearing or I just got a judgment, all of those cases have been assigned to a caseworker and are currently being processed. And we do check every day if there's new applications that come in where there is an eviction notation, so we can get those assigned. As you can see, also, we have already, in addition to the ones where checks have gone out, we have identified over 1,100 that are either duplicate or denied, and work through those. And then we have the other about 2,200 currently active with caseworkers that they are processing through. The other thing, as mentioned before, that I think is really critical that we continue to emphasize is this now 7.7 million that has gone out the door. is on top of the 18 million that already went out the door in the previous round that supported almost 4,500 households to help maintain their housing. So again, we were starting that back in May of 2020, well before pretty much anyone else. We have not stopped. There has never been a point where we have not been releasing funds. The other just quick thing I would mention, in addition to us prioritizing those evictions and the high needs areas, and you can see that about half the grants so far that have gone out have gone to households in those high needs areas. It is a requirement of the Treasury that we also prioritize applications where a member of the household has been unemployed for 90 days or more. So that is a self-reported number, but what we're seeing at this point is more than half of applicants are identifying that at least one member of the household has been unemployed for those 90 days or more. So we do look for those 3 prioritization criteria, assign them. And we do also, because we have gotten through a lot of those priority applications, we are now doing a split assignment. So about 60 case assignments that go out a week are from prioritized, from those 3 priority criteria, and about 40% are other applications that we are just catching up and working through. So that is where we are with our main CRRP for COVID rent relief. And I just want to touch on 2 other programs quickly. So we did do a set aside of the COVID rent relief for those that are currently in shelter or experiencing street homelessness to support them in getting into housing. And so we offered security deposit, first month's rent in full, and we offered a subsidy for the next 5 months of their rent. We started doing this in October of 2020, and to date, we have helped over 190 households move into their own permanent housing. Many of these are room rentals. Some of them people decided to be roommates together. And this was really, the impetus of a shelter or the street is not a place to be during the public health pandemic, and anything we can do to help you get into housing. So these were primarily individuals who it was more of an economic hurdle versus needing case management or additional support services. So since October of 2020, those 190 plus households, we have only experienced about 5% of them coming back and asking for any additional support or coming back to shelter. So we will continue to monitor that, but it's a tremendous success that there's so many of these individuals that just with this small subsidy, we were really able to help get on the right path to resolving their homelessness and to being in their own permanent housing. The next program that we did was our exit bonus program. So this similar, it was for those who were in the shelter, but it was most likely more of an economic reason that brought them there. And so we opened up the exit bonus program to individuals who this was their first time experiencing homelessness. They entered the shelter after March 2020. So they have only been in the shelter during the public health emergency. They had a low acuity need, so they did not need many supports or additional services, and no known significant substance use or mental health challenge. And in this program, they were offered $5,000 in direct cash assistance to resolve their homelessness in whatever way they saw fit. So we have had some individuals who have used that to buy a plane ticket to go move to be with family who was going to let them live with them across the country. People have used it to support rent payments. People have used it to pay off debt that was preventing them from accessing new housing. A whole variety of ways people have used it. We had our first individuals go into this pilot program in December of 2020. The first checks were picked up. We've had 52 people so far participate in the program, and again, less than 10% of them have come back. And that, it really is a tremendous to think about with sometimes just these small allocations, how much we can help someone change that trajectory and their access to housing. A final note I would just mention with this program, I mentioned it was a pilot program. We are doing surveys of all of the participants every month to kind of help us gauge what barriers do come up, what resources do they need. We're doing a survey every month for the 12 months after they pick up their check. And so we will be able to come back in about 6 months or so, and really give an assessment of, are there adaptations or changes we can make to this program to even make it even more impactful and better, and then hopefully scale it up even more than the 50 participants that we have. So with that, I will turn it back to the chair.
Thank you both. I know we're going to hear from DHCA in just a moment. I did have just a couple of points, then I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Glass, who is our lead on vulnerable and homeless populations, and then back to Chair Reamer, and then to Councilmember Jawanda, who had some questions as well. And Councilmember Rice, if you have questions, just let me know. And then we will go to DHCA and the Sheriff's Office. But I know that there have been concerted efforts to ensure that the responses are culturally appropriate and bilingual. Could you talk, Ms. Harris or Ms. Branda, a little bit about those efforts and what you've been seeing? We got the incredible news that through Por Nuestra Salud y Bienestar and a variety of different, hands on deck, we're exceeding rates within vaccination. And I know there was an intentional connection to that effort and others to help cross-promote different programs and services. Could you just briefly about those efforts? That would be great. And then I have a follow-up point or question I'd like to make before turning it over to Councilmember Glass. Ms. Harris.
So I'll actually take that one. That's okay. So as we mentioned, we did ensure that the application was translated into the top 7 languages in the county. It was professionally translated, both the tenant application and the landlord application side, so it is accessible from that point. We do have bilingual staff, Amharic, Korean, Spanish, Portuguese, French, all in-house, and they all have access, any of our staff has access to the HHS language line to ensure that we can provide services in any language, and everyone goes through training, and we've done refresher training on making sure your statements and your approach is that culturally sensitive and appropriate. With outreach, we have also worked with many of our partners in the different areas, Gilchrist Center, the outreach groups that Diane View was heading up, Identity, CASA, HIP, LEDC, MCPS. We have worked with all of them, the hubs, to ensure that all of their staff and case managers understand and know the program. So when they're interacting with clients who may be a little hesitant to come to us first, they can hopefully be that facilitator to help them understand the program enough that they're ready and willing to work with us. We have translated the flyers, all the FAQs, all the materials also in all those languages, and have them reviewed by native speakers of those languages to ensure that any slight changes, tweaks that we should be making are there to make sure that we are doing that. This is a good point to just emphasize. We have done our utmost to emphasize that the program is open to any Montgomery County resident. Immigration status is not a consideration when we are looking at any of these applications. And so we do encourage anyone who has experienced a financial impact due to COVID to apply and avail themselves of this support.
Thank you. That's really helpful. The other thing is that the level of financial support for families right now is unprecedented in my lifetime, because between EITC, the child tax credit that's going to be made available today, the food security support that the county has been able to provide, that doesn't include the stimulus that the federal provided with direct cash payments to families, which the county was able to match early on in the pandemic. So, and that is in addition to the rental assistance. And I'm sure we're referring within each of these calls, which is one of the reasons why it's taking a little bit longer to be able to refer to different residents' resources. But are we keeping track globally of, in addition to rental assistance, all those other resources that are available to our residents? Just to have a better sense, especially as we go into the final phase of ARPA funding and looking at policies moving forward. How is that being taken into account? Who's tracking that?
So I can, Councilmember Alvarez, I'll take that one for just at least a part of that one. We do track all those different referrals and resources that we're taking advantage of, at least in our internal to the department. So whether it's referrals for eligibility support services or food stamps or anything else, that information is tracked and maintained. What we haven't done and haven't been able to do, I think at this point, just I suspect because of time, is figure out what that average contribution to a family or to a household looks like when you put it all together. And I think that's an important piece for us to do. It's from my perspective, we're busy trying to figure out how we get this thing done and how we get the work out there. But we're tracking that information so that as we have time, we can go back and look. It'll help us to understand what people need, what their collective vulnerability looks like, and hopefully help us to think about how we structure future benefits and future programs to help.
Terrific. Yeah, and I think that we're never going to be able to catch our breath. It's just wave after wave after wave. But I do think that there would be, and if the council can help in that regard, whether through the Office of Legislative Oversight or just an additional set of very capable hands, let us know, because we know how busy you all are. But that will help guide and inform better decision making moving forward. It's never going to be enough. But at least we'll be in a better position to understand where we might need to target investments more than others.
Agreed. I think you're right. It's not going to be enough, but it's about what's the need, what's the gap, and how do we close? How best do we work to close that gap for households and for families?
Terrific. I will now call on the lead of our homeless and vulnerable populations, Councilmember Glass, who I believe recently attended a regional briefing on this very issue and may be able to shed some perspective from that angle. Councilmember Glass.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And this was a big topic of conversation over the weekend, actually, at the National Association of Counties, where they wanted to recognize the incredible work that we here in Montgomery County have been doing, and all of you have been doing for years, for a very long time. And I know that Ms. Harris spoke to one of the breakout groups and heard it was a really, really good conversation. And so to continue to be recognized by the National Association of Counties and by other regional leaders is another testament to the incredible work that we all are doing, that county government is doing. And so thank you, Mr. Chair, for elevating that point, and Ms. Harris for representing us so well over the weekend. And so speaking of weekends, actually, Ms. Branda, you had talked about how staff are working nights and weekends and are being very responsive, and that is really good to hear, because I know that over the last few months there have been some concerns expressed by the council and constituents about the slow disbursement of some of these funds. So to see that there is a course correction is really important. To make sure that people are able to receive funds and stay safely in their homes. And appreciate the chair's question about the cultural proficiency and the language barriers that might exist. But adding one more point to that, I'm curious that this course correction, has it been the result of just staffing up and hiring more people? And I'm just curious, what is a day in the life of somebody who's doing this processing, so that we can all wrap our minds around it? Because I know the volume of work continues to grow. And as we ask so much of our able staff, I just want to paint a picture of what they're doing.
Sure. So we did, oh, sorry. Did you want to? Okay. We did bring on about 40 additional staff to help with CRP3. And we have reallocated some merit staff that regularly would be doing other work to support this effort also. So the staff came in March, April, most of the staff came in. So there was just onboarding and training time, and that's gonna, take into some time to ramp up. As I mentioned, we purchased a new application software system, so everyone just needed to get trained in understanding and using that system. The external application portal was actually open before all of our customizations for our internal case management were finished. So people actually were starting to apply a little bit before we were still finishing training and getting in. So that's part of that ramp up time too. We didn't want to delay starting to collect information just because we needed to drop more time for preparing case management. But what ultimately happens, I mean, it's honestly, it's a very extensive process, but we have individuals who are there sorting the cases so that they can be assigned. Each staff member has an allotment of cases that they get a week. Before that case is assigned to them, we are already checking that case to see if they have received benefits from HHS previously. So if they're already in our EICM system and providing that number, because ultimately our checks process through there, and just making sure we have that household organized. Once the person gets the case, they have the opportunity to review all the information that was either submitted by the tenant or the landlord, start to look at what's missing, what is unclear. There was one case I was reviewing this morning where the person applied as a one-person household, but in their COVID impact statement mentions family members. And so, we have to check in, okay, is there someone missing from this household? What's going on? If the landlord has not completed their part, starting to do that outreach to the landlord, but then literally just getting on the phone, sending emails, sending letters where we don't have an email address, through USPS to the individual to make sure that we're collecting. We have clarity on all the final information. Speaking back to the equity, we did make a conscious decision that a tenant can submit an application without actually uploading any of their support documentation, because we know that there are many people who are being helped on the phone, whether it's language literacy, computer access, and we didn't want to prevent them from getting their name in. But that does mean that our workers then are, working with them to track down the information. So they're collecting all the information, and then they're calculating what that benefit should be based on that, ensuring non-duplication, reviewing that ledger, working through that whole calculation. So we have a lot of math going on, more than we usually do in our department. And then it's submitted for a supervisor to review, who confirms everything is correctly inputted, all the information is there that we needed, there's no questions about the calculation of that benefit. And then it's submitted for final review through our fiscal reviewers to ensure that there's, another secondary final check. And then it goes over into our EICM system, which talks with our ERP system, lots of acronyms today, and then checks are cut. If it is an if it is an imminent eviction, we will cut those checks in our office. So then we are coordinating the pickup of those checks. And I know that took some time, but I've greatly simplified it in many ways also, right? But
absolutely. And, I appreciate you showing us under the hood, right, of how this complex operation has been brought up to speed to meet the need. And, I think, quite frankly, the hiring of nearly 40 people in this economy, one, is a good thing. And also it is what's necessary to keep people safely in their homes. And so certainly the onboarding process, the checks that need to be in place to make sure that the system is working properly and no one is unfairly using the system. But all of that is very helpful, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. And another thing that you had mentioned, I just want to pick up on. You had mentioned some of the small subsidy that is being used to help people who are experiencing homelessness to be able to secure a rental deposit and to pay for a few months of rent, right? And I'm curious if there's anybody who has been over the last number of months at the Long Branch Center or the Caulfield Center, which have been temporary overflow shelters since the pandemic started, if those individuals have been able to benefit from this really good program.
Yes, absolutely. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but yes.
Good. No. That is good, because again, as we continue working here, all of us, to make sure that homelessness is rare, brief, and non-recurring. Community members are interested, right, in getting into a post-pandemic life, but we want to do it in a fair and equitable way and make sure that people are not unnecessarily put back onto the street. So to hear that these programs are in place and that people are benefiting from them leads us, to look down the road and see a brighter future. So that is good. And the last question I want to ask before turning it back over to my colleagues. I had the pleasure yesterday of having this conversation in an augmented form as part of the Interagency Commission on Homelessness. And so we had a different conversation with a lot of our social service providers, really helpful. But one of the things that was briefly mentioned here was the rocket docket and the court system. And I want to bring to everyone's attention, I'm not sure if it was mentioned here, is that as I recall from yesterday, there are some landlords who are not interested in receiving the government the subsidy that we're providing, right? The rental subsidy. Can you elaborate a little bit more about that and put that into some context?
So I will say, from our perspective, we really have not had landlords disengaging from us. We definitely have some landlords who are not interested in completing the application because, either they're maybe illegally subleasing and they don't want a record, of that there, or they just don't want to register as a vendor with the county system, so they don't complete the application. But we have not, as far as I'm aware, we have not had an issue of a landlord refusing the payment from that. We definitely have some landlords that are much more proactive than others. We have ones that will proactively reach out to us and say, hey, you helped me with this person's case. I have 5 other people that I filed eviction for. Did they apply? Can I make sure that, their case gets handled too? Because I don't want to evict them. We have had many landlords who have, when we have reached out to them and said, are you willing to forgive some of this? Like, this is a lot of debt. Anyone who owes over $12,000, we are asking them, the landlords, to forgive 10%. We have had 1 or 2 landlords that have said no, but far and large, almost all of them have said, sure, I'll forgive $1,000 because I recognize that means I'm probably getting 2,000 or 3,000 more at the end of the day. So I think that was something that Jonathan, the lawyer from CASA, who was at ICH, was mentioning more from the court side that they were seeing. But I have to say, we have not really been seeing that from the distribution of funds side.
Well, so I see Frank nodding. I don't know if he has any comments to add. And I think you were correct. It was Jonathan with CASA yesterday who was mentioning that. And again, there wasn't any context provided, but I wanted to bring that to this conversation because as we're talking about rental subsidies, if there are in fact landlords who are rejecting them, that is a problem.
I can add a little bit of context to that. Alternatively, I can wait until I talk more about the court situation as a whole. It's worth noting that Jonathan and I and our counterparts at HPRP we're not in contact with every landlord. We're in contact with a specific subset of landlords and tenants who have gotten to the very final part of the court process, the very final part of the eviction process. So at that point, the county may be seeing people who are more willing to engage because it's from a wider subset of the rental market. When we get there, and particularly while we were covering this, Jonathan in particular covered most days with pro se landlords, which they tend to be smaller. They tend to, unfortunately, situations can get more personal. So we are absolutely seeing rejection of these funds by landlords, although I do understand why that wouldn't necessarily come up as much with the county. So again, I can talk more about that later on. I don't want to hide it.
Sure. Okay. Well, definitely follow up. Oh, Amanda, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, just one comment about that. I mean, if a landlord refuses to participate, we can still make a payment to the client. So I don't see how a landlord could refuse a payment from the client if it's not actually coming from the county. So there are some workarounds.
That is a good clarification because the program, as I understand it, it was a direct payment to the landlord. So to know that there is a workaround in those situations, that's good clarification. Okay, good discussion, Mr. Chair. I turn it back to you, and clearly we'll follow up with Mr. Vitale when he speaks a little bit later about the courts.
Thank you. And I'll just note housekeeping. Councilmember Reamer has to leave at 11. He has an excused absence, but he will not be able to stay through this entire session. So I just wanted to let everyone know that. But Chair Reamer.
So can I interject something?
Yes, of course, Dr. Kroll.
Just as an additional follow-up to a comment on something that you asked Councilmember Glass, and that was about the pace around this. And Alana has walked you through what that process looks like, so you get a sense of why the pace is the way it is. But one of the things that has happened is that we have ramped up in terms of the rate at which we're putting out the information. If you go back to the slide, you'll see that we have ramped that up over the last several weeks. And now we have a clearer understanding of where we need to add additional staff. So we are talking about how we add additional staff and bring additional staff on board to speed this process up even more, to make sure we get to or exceed the September deadline that Treasury has put on us for putting out these funds. So that deadline is one place. The staff is one target for us, but picking up the pace is something that we will continue to work on in the coming weeks.
Thank you. One comment I am hearing, and I'll just leave it with you, that caseworkers are not always applying the federal rules or county rules as we intend or as required. And they're asking for more restrictive, more difficult documents than may be required, or so on and so forth. So I would just like to pass on to our team at HHS. We may need a little quality control, please, with the caseworker group to ensure that it's as you intend. For example, I am told that insurance documentation and residency documentation that is allowed under the federal guidelines is not being accepted by the caseworkers. I can't vouch, this is coming to me from constituents who are helping other residents try to get through. So I want to just pass that to you and just ask for a little quality control review, please. Could you please help me understand a big picture here? I heard it explained that about 70% of the filings, the eviction filings, are dismissed. And we know from previous discussions, there's all kinds of reasons why they are dismissed. And then about 30% are not. Of that 30%, what percent are likely facing actual eviction versus now proceeding with some kind of conversation with the landlord? Historically, as we know, overwhelmingly, those will not result in eviction. But the real point I'm asking is, what's the match between residents who are potentially facing eviction and our resources here? We have a lot of federal funding. We have a lot of funding for rent relief. And it seems to me like when you really cut through it, the number of people who might be facing eviction may not exceed the resources that we are generally applying here. So could you just share with us some of that big picture analysis from your perspective, please?
So I can start with this one. So as I mentioned, we do have a question in our application that asks people to self-disclose if they are, if they have received a court notice for a hearing, have a judgment, have that read in white, and we have prioritized processing of those applications. We had about around 2,000 applicants identify that for themselves, and those are the ones that we either have already provided assistance for or are working on finishing to close. So we do anticipate that we are able to provide the resources for those households. I want to note that with the caveat that there are some of those households who were far behind well before COVID. We had one household that came across my plate the other day who actually had a balance of over $13,000 prior to March of 2020 and has not been able to pay their rent over this past year and a half. We might not be able to keep that particular housing that they have. But as was mentioned before, our goal is to help make sure that they are in a safe place moving forward. And so we do have our social workers who do our regular prevention and diversion work, who will go much more in depth with these households in terms of looking at other resources, reviewing budgets with them, identifying alternative options, and helping to make sure that hopefully that family lands on their feet in a more sustainable housing option for them. And we have financial resources that we can bring to the table for those also. So that's the extreme.
Are we able to resolve their arrears as well?
I mean, we have a really tough conversation with them because we can't pay the 13,000 pre-COVID arrears with ERA funds, right? We can only pay for arrears accrued after March 13th of 2020. So the challenge is that even if we support them with the 12 months maximum that we're allowed to from ERA, there is still a tremendous balance on their account. And so we have a really tough conversation with them about, what is the income coming into the household? Is this housing option in particular sustainable for you? Can we develop a payment plan with your landlord that makes it sustainable? And if not, where can we help you? We have housing locators on staff in addition to our social workers. Where can we help you land that is sustainable for you? And so we can help them get set up. We can do security deposits the first 3 months of rent at that new place. And so again, that's the extreme. And I do want to emphasize that that's most households that are coming in are not in that boat. Most households are coming in with an eviction notice where they owe maybe $3,000 on the eviction notice. They've accrued maybe an additional $2,000 in arrears, so their arrears are $5,000. We are paying that $5,000, and we are giving them 3 months of prospective rent to give them that safety net to catch up with some of their other bills. As Chair Albornoz mentioned, there's the child tax credit funds starting to flow to many of these families now, and so giving them that prospective rent for the 3 months that hopefully enables them to be in a much better sustainable place down the road.
One of the surprising stories of the pandemic has been personal income has gone up on average, I think substantially because of these cash payments.
Councilmember, just to add two things. One is you get a good sense from listening to Alana about the complexity of the conversations that have to take place sometimes with folks as we're processing through through their applications. But the other thought I had that I wanted to share, and maybe Alana or Amanda will weigh in on this, is that the folks that are applying before they get an eviction notice in some cases. So your question about whether or not we have resources available to meet the need. If it's just for the evictions, folks who are actually really facing evictions, perhaps in some cases, but there's a larger population of folks that are applying than just those folks who've actually gotten to the point
You're
of
stopping people from getting to eviction.
Exactly. Yes.
Are you able to personally, like for each person who will actually face eviction, do you have the resources to engage with that person and figure out whether they are eligible?
I think you're asking, do we have the staffing to process through the applications and the financial dollars to satisfy those? So as was mentioned, we have recognized a couple of gaps in our staffing, and we are working to address those gaps. But overall, yes, we anticipate.
Confidence. Thank you, Alana. We can say with confidence that we are stopping people from getting to eviction as best we can. Mm-hmm. And those who get to that point, we have resources on the ground. We are able to work with those individual households. And if they are eligible for funding, we are able to take them through that process. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, that is mostly accurate. I will say it depends on what point they are at. Like, we don't have the resources to reach out to every single household that has a filing. That's like 50,000 households.
Not the filings, yes, the ones that have not been dismissed.
Councilman, I think it might be useful to hear something from the sheriff about this process and the flow of evictions, because I think there's a point at which we enter into this process. So the sheriff's office may be.
Now, I think I'm just trying to get a sense of this global sense here. I think it's really what's kind of on all of our minds. It's like, how adequate is our response in a very general sense? So thank you.
Yeah, if I can just add one other thing, I think just to elaborate on what Dr. Kroll is saying is that there's a long tail end of this. So it's not just about who's facing eviction today, it's about who's going to be facing eviction in the future. So with the ERAP 2 funds, we actually have until September 25 to spend that in recognition that there's a lot of people that have figured it out over the last few months. They've borrowed money, maybe they have accrued credit card debt. At some point, that's going to catch up with them. And if a lot of these other federal supports dry up, there isn't the economic impact payments or the tax credits. If those go away, they might be in a precarious situation a year or two down the road. So we want to make sure that we're able to handle it at that point.
Thanks.
Okay, Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I just want to really say thank you for all the work that DHHS is doing. This is really, and our Sheriff's Department and our nonprofit community. This is hard, and it's a lot, and you all are doing a great job in difficult circumstances. And we know that the pace has been an issue nationwide, but the steps that you've been taking is 40 new staff, the retraining of caseworkers, going down the list. It's really heartening to hear. So I want to start there because I'm going to ask some very specific questions, and I just want to say that at the beginning. Ms. Harris, you said something that I think is so important at the end there, and I don't want it to get lost. The tail on this is very long, and I know personally, because I was one of these people at one point, there are just a set of people who are going to do, anything they can to not apply for government assistance, or they don't know about it, and they've been borrowing, they've been using credit card debt, they've been doing everything. And so that will run out. The federal aid will run out. And hopefully things like the child tax credit, can remain permanent. There's other things we're talking about to provide support. But so I really appreciate you making that point that this is going to be a long-term ongoing process. And I think Ms. Branda made the other point that just how many people, or one of you made the point, how many people were housing insecure prior to COVID. That's a huge number of households spending half or more on their rent, and many more spending 30% or more on their rent. And so we just know that this is, these are long-term structural issues, but you're doing a great job right now. I want to underscore, Councilman Reamer mentioned this. Several of us have been contacted by constituents about the documentation. And just one specific point, as you're doing that quality control, which I know you're doing anyway, but just underscore, there were some emails forwarded to me that showed that, insurance wasn't able to be used, and that there was documentation being requested within a day, like an email, and so you have to get it to me by 5 p.m. tomorrow. Otherwise, so I don't know if I'm sure that's not typical. I'm just telling you that that's been sent. And so to the extent that we can just be on the lookout for those types of things, and we'll obviously forward you. I've already sent you one. We'll forward you any of those cases. So active evictions that you're helping, it's 2,000, you said? Is that the number roughly?
Yes.
Okay. And you're and that's out of the 7,000 applications, or 7,800, whatever, I forget the total number.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. So about a quarter of the people, my math is off, whatever that percentage is, there's a significant number of the applicants who are facing eviction right now, and those are the ones you're prioritizing and trying to process as quickly as possible.
Correct.
And you'll be able to get them the funds if they're not in that extreme situation. Like you said, you have the funds and will be able to get those to them prior to their eviction.
Yes, so we have been working with those that are further down the process, closer to that potential eviction date. And as we clear those, we're moving more upstream, and we'll continue to do so. But, assuming, of course, eligibility, and if not eligible for this program, reiterating that we do have other programs and assistance that we can connect individuals to.
And as far as to this global point, I know not everyone that applies will get it because of, you have to process and confirm and verify. But assuming everyone who did apply would get some portion of money, do you have a sense of, do we have enough money in the pipeline to give out to all those applicants?
So that's a really, it's a good question, but a really challenging question, because that is actually one of the places that we have noticed in the application that people have not filled out the best. So if you look at the total amount requested, the total amount requested to date has been 25 million. We know that is well under what is the actual need and is what's being requested. And that does not include our contribution to prospective, because individuals are mostly asking for their arrears. How off that number is, we're still trying to dig into deeper and try to get a better sense of. But, you know, as mentioned, we do have the 59 million in this round. We have another 34 million allocated to the county in the next round. So that is something that we are continuing to monitor and track really closely. On average, the benefit going out to each household at this point has been hovering between 10 and 11,000 per household. So if you work the math that way, between ERA 1 and 2, we do have enough funds.
So if you okay, that's what would be my next question. So if you take the average amount and multiply it by amounts of applications, we would have enough between the two rounds. But it would be sounds like be pretty close.
Yeah, so we're still working through. The other thing that I have to acknowledge is, you know, we have the over 7,000 applications. We are still working through duplicates. There are many people who have honestly self-disclosed to us. They thought it was a lottery, so they thought the more applications they put in, the better their chance of getting assistance. And we have found people who have put in 20 applications, you know, the same household. So we are working through clearing all of those, and I think that will, you know, as we're doing that, it will help us continue to redefine how close that number is going to be. You know, in terms of what is the actual absolute number of unique applications versus just a total application.
Well, that's really helpful. I'm glad to hear that. Even with that, it sounds like we're okay for now. Obviously, more applications could come in, and you know, we'll have to deal with that. But just keep us posted as you clean that data. I think that's something we all would want to know about. And then the last, just a couple questions here are. So I had asked before, and I'm really happy to see, unhappy with the data, just looking away this, the racial breakdown of who's applying. And I saw that on the slide there, it's similar to our homeless data. You have 56% of the applicants being Black, African-American, 25% are Latino, and it goes down from the single digits from there. And then the geographic distribution I was looking at when we had the chart up, 20904, you know, some of those dark green in the eastern part of the county and some of the up county that you have, where it maps that where folks live. What are we doing to target either our outreach? Because I imagine, you know, because it's geographically and racial and ethnically overlapped, you know, are we going into these buildings and where we know that there's a lot of people that are in these categories and encouraging people to apply, and then are there any specific strategies just to try to, as we're trying to do with the vaccine, to get in those communities and provide the services? I know there's a lot of overlay with the food distributions. We're trying to do that and all that, but could you talk a little bit about the strategy to realizing those deep disparities of what we're trying to do to tackle that?
Sure. So I believe that Director Nagam is going to speak to our outreach efforts, so I don't want to.
Right. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you. First of all, I'll just extend my appreciation as well. I know this has been a hard slog and it's really difficult work, and the conversation today just reiterates how complicated each one of these cases are and how challenging it is. I know we're all frustrated and want to see more money going out quicker to more people. We know how much need there is out there, but I know that there is a tremendous amount of effort occurring, and I am pleased to see that there has been a significant amount of improvement with that over time, that we seem to be learning and improving and building on what we've learned as we go, which you know, really is a very positive thing to see. So thank you for that. Thank you for all you're doing. I also know that everybody who's working on this is also working on about 25 other issues during this crisis. So we see a lot of familiar faces at a lot of different briefings talking about a lot of different topics, and recognize that the health and human services, other duties as assigned, has become the largest part of the ledger. So Thanks for all you do and everybody in the department. It really is tremendous, and appreciate also, it's clear that this is a partnership, that it doesn't work if we don't have nonprofit partners. It doesn't work if we don't have the property owners willing to work with the department. It doesn't work if we're not actually reaching the folks who need it and making sure that we're communicating in their language and on their turf, so to speak, not asking them to come to us, but making sure that we're going to them. So I know there's work to be done in that regard, and we have a lot of room for improvement. Government is not necessarily always historically good at that, but I think we're improving, and we've learned in this crisis just how important that improvement is. So thank you for continuing to work at that. We'll continue to push. It's coming from the same place that your work is coming from, which is making sure that we're providing the services we know so many residents need. So thank you for that. I just had a couple questions. A lot of my questions have been answered, which I appreciate. The first question is, there's all these different pots of money. I know we've talked about them at different times. Is there a way we can just get a total amount of rental relief, a total amount that's pending, a total amount that's gone out the door? I mean, the different. I'm generally pretty decent at numbers, but I am having a little bit of trouble of following that. I know we've broken it down, which is really helpful because not all of these pots of money are created equally and they're not doing the same thing. But I think having that aggregate number just to know the breadth and magnitude of what we're doing, I think is important for us to have. We don't have to have it right now, but if we could get that subsequent to this meeting, I think it's helpful as we move forward, and we can kind of watch to see how that progression is going. I know that money's being added, so it's not fair to look at the first 2 million or the second 20 million the same as the most recent 31 million, but I think it would be helpful for all of us. Related to that, I'm just curious, so the 12,000 is the maximum, the average is approximately 10,500, and you talked a bit about if for those who are receiving the 12,000, there's a request for a forgiveness, which I think is a good thing. In fact, several of us have talked in the beginning about this question of county support in exchange for forgiveness as a partnership. I'm just curious, is the $10,500 average, is that because the average person does not have a total of 12,000 in need? If you also were providing prospective rent, is there another reason for that? I'm just curious as to that. And do we think that those folks are going to come back? Because if you haven't hit your $12,000 limit, you still are eligible for additional funds.
Yeah, so just to clarify, so the 12,000 is a soft cap for households that are making less than 30% AMI. We can provide additional assistance. So we've provided as much as, I think the highest one I saw was like $22,000, just because I'm approving and that number sticks out to me. In those situations, we do require that the landlord forgive 10%. So we're not just going to hand over $25,000 without any kind of give.
So the idea is, in order to exceed the $12,000 soft cap, you're asking for something from the landlord as well.
Correct.
Which certainly makes sense.
Correct. And we're seeing a mix. It's either they have a lot and a ton of arrears, or it's just a couple months. So that's really where that $10,000 average comes from, is that I think Alana said that it's the average right now is 5 months of arrears. So people either have a lot or they have a little.
So it's 5 months of arrears. It's about $2,000 in rent a month on average. And so there's about a 10,000, give or take, average. I mean, that's basically what you're seeing as the most common.
Yeah, so I mean, we are fortunately seeing a lot of people that are actually in more affordable housing, which is amazing. The average rents we're seeing are hovering closer to the 1,500 mark. But exactly as you said, we're doing the 5 months times their rent, and then if there is up to that 12,000 cap, we'll do as much perspective as we can. But there's a lot of people that are coming in that are actually only 1 or 2 months behind. And I think as Amanda mentioned, it could be that it wasn't easy for them to do that, right? They might have been borrowing funds or using credit cards. We're, not dismissing the challenge of their ability to pay the rent, but we can only pay what's actually in arrears. So we might only be giving 2 months of arrears, the 3 months perspective, we're only giving 5 months total assistance. But again, we can't go past that 3 months, unfortunately, with how the Treasury guidelines are at this point. It's really designed to be more of a retroactive catch-up program than a future support program.
Yeah, I think that's an important point too. I mean, contrary to what we hear, whether it's unemployment benefits or rental relief, most people aren't coming first to get help. They're doing all kinds of desperate things before that, and then put in a really difficult situation. And then, they learn that there might be another option or opportunity. Unfortunately, it's probably after they've made, financial decisions that, continue to put them in a challenging situation that we can't necessarily help with. That's helpful. So the 7,000 applications, I totally appreciate the challenge of that, particularly with people who are desperate. And so if you don't know exactly how it works, you give yourself as good a chance as you can. And if it's a lottery ticket, you can put in as many lottery tickets as possible to increase your odds. It's a logical thing to do. It doesn't make it any easier for your team that has to go through these applications one by one. So I get it on both sides. That's not an easy situation. The 7,000 applications that you currently have, how long do you think it will take based on the current staffing complement and how long it's taking you to get through these things? How long would you expect to get through this? Obviously, we may get more, but don't count any new ones, but ones that we have as of today, how long would you expect to get through those just to be able to, not necessarily to complete the transaction, because that could be a much longer process that you can't determine, but just to process the applications to determine how many are unique and, whether or not this is somebody who is eligible for support and to begin working with it.
Yeah. So we do have a new member that joined our team last week who part of their job is just to do that duplication check so we can try to shrink that down to what is that more accurate number sooner rather than later. Our caseworkers are actively, they have open about 2,200 cases. That's in addition to the 700 plus that we have already processed. So we have a good clip that we're going through in terms of, doing that preliminary review and evaluation of those cases. As I want to reiterate, though, that one thing that Amanda had mentioned at the very beginning is we are not summarily denying any cases. We know that there is human error. We know that there are intricacies to each person's story, and it is critical to us that someone personally contacts them and has a conversation to verify, so that we are not just saying, oh, well, you noted your income was over 8,000, or you didn't request, you didn't put in that you need rental assistance. Actually, you said that you were okay, or you didn't list your COVID impact. We are having those follow-up conversations to really make sure that we are not leaving anyone who may be eligible dismissed or sidelined from the process. So we do keep about 2,200 cases active at any given time. At this point, we're closing between 200 to 300 cases a week. And we anticipate that to continue to increase as everybody becomes more familiar with the system, and we continue to continue to do refresher training with the team. So I can't do math as quickly in my head either, but if we're closing about 300 or so a week at this point, and again, we have talked about some other things that we hope to have in place to ramp that number up even a little bit more.
Sure. I've got 17 weeks in my head. If you have 2,200 active and then 300 a week, give or take, you knock those out of the queue and you add another 300 that you're bringing into the queue. That's like 17 weeks. Does that sound, give or take, reasonable?
Yeah, I think that sounds real reasonable. As we mentioned, we have a 65% spending deadline from Treasury by September 30th of this year. That's what they want to benchmark UNC. So, you know, we are working towards that and trying to keep some cases going for that tail end, and knowing that we are continuing to do that outreach, because we do know there are some people who haven't yet applied who we want to make sure they get in. So, you know, we anticipate that number we'll keep on adjusting, but yeah, that
Councilmember
sounds
Friesen,
about right.
what I'm focused on this is not the total number of applications that are in the pot, but the rate at which we're clearing them, and trying to grow that rate that Alana's referencing, the 200 to 300 a week, and to grow that. That 17 weeks sounds about right, but the goal for us is one of the essential targets is to meet that 65% expenditure requirement, and that I think is going to drive us to add more staff and to add more resources to this pot to grow the pace at which we clear them. At the same time, I think we're also going to try to get more people to apply, obviously, as the need grows. So that 7,000 number may stay static, it may rise or fall, but it's our process, the rate of processing cases that we're looking to push to accelerate.
Yeah, if you could keep us posted on those two numbers, I think is really important. The 17-week number of just how long you're tracking to get through the applications that have currently been received, and then where you are in relation in terms of tracking towards the 65% number. I think it'd just be helpful for all of us to understand where things are, and I think those are probably the most operative. And then maybe the average level of support, 10,500 currently. Does it go up? Does it go down? I think it'd be helpful for us to see that.
So all of that is going to be contained in the slide, is in the post report slide that we do for you every week.
Yeah, exactly. So just keep us posted on those three things, and whether it's a pulse report or otherwise, we appreciate it. Thank you. That's all the questions I have, and thanks again for all the hard work.
Thank you all. Just a quick logistics check. We're at 11:07. The HHS committee is meeting after this joint committee session to deliberate, discuss Bill 2021, the swimming pool lifeguard requirements. So why don't we try, if we can, this is a meaty and important and critical issue, but to set a goal of trying to wrap this up, let's say by 11:45, to allow some time for that other vote. And we know we still have to hear from DHCA, our sheriff's office, and Mr. Vitale. I'll just make two final points before we transition to DHCA. The first is, and Alana and Amanda have been very diplomatic, but our federal partners have not made this easy for us. The guidelines have been a moving target since the beginning of the pandemic. And serendipitously, my colleagues and I have the opportunity to meet with Senator Cardin tomorrow morning as part of thanks to our federal delegation's incredible outreach, an opportunity to meet with him. And so I will ask this question at the end of all of you. I don't want you all to have to answer it right now, but what would you like for us to ask Senator Cardin from a federal perspective, or request that may make this a little bit easier and more streamlined for our local jurisdictions and your hard work? And then the final just points, and there's no time to go into this right now, but I'd like to follow up on it. Obviously, these families are under a tremendous amount of stress. And this, of course, is contributing to the massive behavioral health challenges that we've talked about in other joint committee sessions. And so I would love to hear a little bit more, not now because we don't have time, but at a future session or as a follow-up, how are we referring clients that we are talking to, families that clearly are in crisis and under stress, to behavioral health services? And is there an opportunity for us to proactively, even if there isn't a request, let them know of mental health and health and wellness programs and services that are available to them? So just we can follow up on that later, but something I wanted to point out. So with that, let's turn it over to DHCA and Mr. Mnagam, if you could introduce yourself and your team, and then I don't know if you have a formal presentation or just want to provide some comments and feedback, but I will now turn it over to you. And we're getting some pretty substantial feedback there, so not sure what that is. Mr. Nagam?
You're muted.
Can you hear us now?
We can hear you many times. So if you could just check that again. While we're waiting for DHCA and in the interest of time, Captain Lewis, why don't we, oh, did you fix it?
Can you hear us now?
Now we can, yep, now you're good.
Okay, we lost them.
We can hear you.
We cannot hear you. Let me see.
Or you can't hear us. Well, there you go.
Yeah, we apologize. We're using a phone and a computer at the same time. Okay, let me call.
So why don't you all mute for now, and why don't we turn to Captain Lewis. From your perspective, Ms. Lewis, could you talk about what you're seeing from the Sheriff's Office, anything you'd like to add to what we've heard from HHS?
Sure. Good morning to everybody. And thanks for having me here. To start off with a little bit of good news, I know it's been mentioned a little bit. We have started this week with providing a spreadsheet to HHS with the names, case number, and address of those people that have been scheduled for an eviction. So the list initially is a little bit large because it's everything that we have. We started it on Monday and provided 351 names. Each Monday, we will provide a list of what was scheduled that prior week. So we're thinking maybe that list will look like 20 to 40 people, but we really don't know. We'll just have to see how it goes. As of yesterday, we had 17 new evictions that have been scheduled. So it's scheduled doesn't mean they're actually going to go forward. So it's just the schedule. So that'll be helpful in their outreach. I have a PowerPoint that might help, so you guys can see some of the stuff I'm going to talk about. Let me see if I can bring this up properly. Can you guys see this?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So just to give a little bit of the statistics of what we're seeing right now. As of July 13th, we have 1,480 active writs on file. So those are writs that we have received from the court. Of those, as of yesterday, we have 368 that have been scheduled for eviction. And those are the names, case numbers, and addresses that have been provided to HHS. So they can compare them with their lists and do some outreach and hopefully help those people. Evictions now are currently being scheduled about 17 weeks out. We have several time slots a day that we schedule evictions.
Sorry, Captain, you said 17, this says 7. Can you just clarify?
At 7. 7 is much better. We have 7 weeks out. Thank you very much. I'm sorry. We have like about 8 different time slots throughout the day that we schedule evictions. Those are really dependent on if we have smaller things where we know we're just going to change the lock. Walk through. Scheduled. They're less scheduled if we have like a large dwelling, a household that's fully furnished. That'll take longer. We also will do multiple evictions at an apartment complex. We could schedule 15 of them. So that'll take up most of the day, but in actuality, we usually only end up going through a third of those. The other ones will be canceled, moved, or just walk through. So there's very few that we physically end up doing full evictions on. I know it was kind of discussed a little bit earlier by some other people. This is just a little bit of history about what we see. So we see if we look back in 2019 before the pandemic, there's roughly 50,000 L&T cases that are in the courthouse. Of those cases, about 12,000 of them actually turn into writs that are sent to the sheriff's office. Of those in 2019, we conducted 938 evictions, which is the 7.9%. So as you can see, when you look at the percentages, it's true. We generally do about 7.5% to 8% of the evictions of the writs that have sent to us from the L&Ts that are actually filed in court. So it's good that that percentage is on the low side. Let's hope, post-pandemic that we can keep them down low. To show just a little bit of the stats for the past couple of months. Now, granted, March is when we first started off, really doing evictions, so the numbers are extremely low right here. We received 8 writs from the court in March. We had 20 active writs on file, so that's some of them from the prior months that were some of the emergency writs. 27 of those were returned to the court by the landlords not taking any actions, which means that the writs expire. The writs are good for 60 days. We evicted 9 people this month, and we returned 8 of them to the court. If we look at April, we start to see where the numbers of writs that we're receiving from the court are increasing a bit. We got 100 this month. We had a total of 106 on file from the previous months. We sent back 13 of them to the court. We did 1 eviction in the month of April, and the landlords canceled five evictions that month. If we look in May, we're starting to see where the numbers are starting to increase. We've received 485 writs from the court. We had a total of 549 writs on file, which shows that a lot of the landlords aren't calling to set up evictions. The fact that that number is so high still. This month we didn't return anything to the court. Remember, the writs are good for 60 days, so they haven't expired yet. So this right here are writs that have expired with the landlords not taking any action. This is usually our highest number. So I assume in the months to come, we'll start to see an increase with this. We did 9 evictions in the month of May, and the landlords canceled and returned 34 evictions. So this number here are evictions that were writs that were scheduled for an eviction that the landlords ended up canceling. If we look at June, it was a high month. We received 539 new writs from the court. In June, we had active 1,085 writs. We returned 24 writs to the courts that expired. We conducted 27 evictions this month, and we returned 10 that the landlords canceled. If we look what we have currently as of 2 days ago, we have 1,480 writs on file, and we have 368 writs that are scheduled for evictions. Keep in mind, scheduled for evictions, our numbers, the percentage goes down to 7% as to what we actually end up fully doing evictions on. 60 to 70, a large portion of these will go away. The tenants moving, new guys offering rental assistance, so the landlords will cancel them. The tenants pay on their own, or some type of agreement will be worked out. So a lot of these will end up going away. And in the next couple of months, again, when the writs start to expire, we'll see a whole lot more writs that are being returned to the court with the landlords not taking any action. And that's probably because of the assistance that everybody is providing to the tenants and to the landlord. Those will be ones that they won't actually ask us to proceed on. I think that's the majority of the stuff I have. I know that they've mentioned the red and white a couple times during this conversation, so let me unshare my screen. I'm sorry, I don't use Zoom that much. There we go. Did that unshare my screen? So if you can see, this is the red and white for those people that are out there. This is the final notice to vacate eviction sticker that we put on. So several people have mentioned this. This is where we have information on where people can go to get assistance on the bottom. And this is what we post on the door 10 days prior, at least 10 days prior to an eviction being scheduled. Right now, since we're scheduling evictions 7 weeks out, most of the times this will get posted, 6 weeks ahead. So tenants have a lot of advance notice when, that they know something's coming. We don't provide a date. They won't know when it's to occur. If they call in and ask, we tell them it could happen any time within after 10 days. But in reality, it's a couple months that they have advance notice before we're actually going forward on evictions. I know that Frank probably has a lot of good information on what's going on in the court that he could fill all of us in on. That's all I have, unless somebody has some questions.
Thank you, Captain Lewis. Just obviously the numbers are trending in the wrong direction. Certainly not a huge surprise, but still relative within context. It just, I think, underscores a lot of the efforts that we're making both on the front end just prior to an eviction notice and then once an eviction notice has been issued are having an impact because those numbers are, I believe, better than certainly other parts of the region. But Councilmember Jawando has a question, and then we will go to Mr. Vitale next because it's the perfect segue into the court, and then at the end we'll go back to DHCA. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Chair Albornoz, Mr. Vice President. And thank you, Captain, for the update. I just saw that, so 1480 in July, halfway through, that's the number of writs that you have this month, right? That was the number?
That is correct.
And so we're we're a little less than halfway through the month, so we expect that to go up, right? Or is there an ebb and flow during the month? Go ahead.
There's definitely an epic flow throughout the month, but remember, this is all of them that we hold. This isn't unusual on any given year for us to have this amount.
Okay.
I know that having data, this is really the first year that we've been able to do statistics and data. We've gotten some new, records management systems that's helped. So when the average people these numbers look really high, but this is pretty typical for any given year. For evictions, for what we have on file. Even what we're scheduling is not unusual than what we usually do.
Got it. Okay. And you said 368 scheduled, but you said, as you expect, a lot of those won't happen, but you'll probably have more than the 27 you had last month, or most likely with that number.
Probably so.
And when you said not taking action, so explain, what that means as far as the continuing right of the landlord. So say they don't take action for whatever reason. It's been, in an ideal world, we've gotten to the folks, we've helped them. But do they still have the ability to come back and take action at a later date? How long is that in that status? Or is it just once, if you hopefully understand my question, like how long do they have to take action, I guess is the question. It might be more of a legal question. Go ahead.
Sure. When we get a writ from the court, it's good for 60 days. So most of the writs have a dollar amount that the tenant has to pay in order to make the writ go away, make us cancel the eviction. So if that dollar amount is satisfied, that writ is no longer a valid writ, regardless if they owe more money. So we look at the date that the writ was issued. So if the date was issued today on July 15th, any money that they've paid up to that date is good. If the landlord says they owe rent for the month of August, that can't be applicable to this writ. They have to refile. So a lot of the times the landlords will file for an eviction. One is the tactic to get the tenants to know that they're serious. As you know, they get several late rent notices. A lot of tenants don't take action until it's really to the final stage. So a lot of the majority of the writs that the landlords request, they have, but they don't actually end up requesting us to go forward because it's satisfied beforehand.
Got it. And so every 60 days, and then they'd have to file another one. And I'm assuming that happens depending on the situation sometimes.
That is correct. We'll purge the writs once the 60 days comes. We repurge them and return them to the court, stating that no action was taken by the landlord. And if we go out to do an eviction, we always ask how much money has been paid. So we ask the landlord; they have to show us, documentation, on what amount money has been paid. We also ask the tenant to make sure that that dollar amount matches up. And if they've paid enough to satisfy the writ that we have in our hand, even though they may owe more money because court was a couple months ago. So when this writ was issued, it was issued a couple months ago. They may owe money between that point and now. That's not applicable for that writ.
Got it. And my last question / comment, could you state our policy about how the eviction takes place in putting stuff outside in front of on the curb and on the ground. I have seen personally during the COVID period stacks of stuff outside of apartment complexes. I don't know who did it, because it wasn't actively being gathered there, but it was clearly an eviction because there was furniture, huge amount of stuff. Could you state what our policy is when you go in to do an eviction? My understanding is that we do not do that. But if you could just clearly state what our policy is on that, or what the law is on that.
Sure. So if I'm understanding correctly, we put the property, it goes to at the property line. So it's not going to be inside the apartment complex. It has to be out at the property line, from the apartment complex to the county line. So it'll go on the front of the apartment complex. That property stays for 24 hours.
It stays there 24 hours, and then what happens?
And then the landlord is required to have it removed.
Have it thrown away.
Correct. And if they don't, we contact the county, let them know that the property's still there. We first contact the landlord because they're financially responsible. It's their property to do it. But if that doesn't happen, we contact the county. There's a facility there that people that do this, and they'll go out and take all the trash, and it will be destroyed.
All right. I'm gonna have to follow up with you on that, because I thought we weren't doing that particularly during COVID, but I saw it several times happening. And it was on the property line at the edge, kind of almost on the street outside of the apartment building. Okay, so I'll follow up with you offline on that. I did not think that that was still happening, but thank you for the update.
Sure. And per the law in real property, that's the only way we can conduct eviction.
No, I understand. Yeah, I thought there was something that we had put in place during COVID where that wasn't happening, but it's okay. I'll follow up with you. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Joanna, I just texted you. It's an issue I'm concerned about as well. Our office has had a couple questions. I'll follow up with you on that too. All right, Mr. Vitale.
Thank you all for inviting me to talk today. A lot of what I was going to address has been talked about by others here, so in the interest of time, I'm not going to rehash it. I will give you a couple brief updates. As was stated before, the eviction cases are down to 2 days a week instead of 5 days a week, located in Rockville, with cases heard on Wednesdays and Fridays. I'm speaking primarily about the summary docket, the failure to pay rent cases. The non-summary docket, the other types of landlord-tenant cases, which are an important part of this for a couple reasons, are heard on Wednesday afternoons in a different courtroom. We're still staffing the Wednesday failure to pay rent dockets in partnership with HPRP. We don't regularly staff the Friday dockets anymore, although it has happened that we've had somebody there every day since it's moved back to 2 days a week, just because we've had existing clients there and provide assistance on site if we can. So just a couple of brief things. And again, I think that these were alluded to before. The CDC moratorium expires at the end of this month, July 31st. I do not expect it to be extended again. Every conversation that I've had, we were part of a White House work group on eviction diversion programs, and their hand was tipped. I do not expect that to be extended. I also don't expect the governor's order to be extended. It tracks 45 days after the end of the state of emergency, which would expire on August 15th. So, as of August 15th, there is my expectation that there are not going to be any additional COVID-related defenses in these failure to pay rent cases. So, I do want to talk about a new development in terms of how the court is going to treat these defenses. So, during the spring, when we were doing most of these cases, and up until about 2 weeks ago, the court, Montgomery County District Court, had elected to reserve judgments until a later date. They would find that an amount is owed, some $2,000, $5,000, $10,000, mark it down on the sheet, and then write reserved on it, either pursuant to the governor's order or pursuant to the CDC order. I won't get into the differences between raising the two. Suffice to say that the CDC one is almost always more successful than Governor Hogan's, just because of what is required to raise it. So those were reserved, which was a sort of new designation. It wasn't entered and stayed. It wasn't entered and rescheduled. It wasn't dismissed. It was reserved for a later date. So there's a pile in the courthouse that has all of these cases that were reserved in the CDC and all that were reserved under Hogan. When these expire, our expectation at the time was that judgment would be entered automatically. Now, this is unique to Montgomery County, or rather, it was unique to Montgomery County. District courts have some leeway from one to the other on how they want to interpret these things, and here they elected to reserve judgments until a later date. This is a good thing, in my opinion. Judgments are, we focus a lot on evictions here, which we should. That's obviously the number one priority. Judgments are not good for tenants. They harm credit, they make it more difficult to relocate, they can and do result in real and actual harm to people. It is not as bad as a money judgment, and certainly not as bad as an eviction, but it is something to be avoided. So when these expire, the expectation was that judgments would be entered, writs would be obtained in the normal course, and at that point, it would be up to the landlord to schedule and the sheriff's office to supervise the evictions. However, things have changed a little bit. So about 2 weeks ago now, Chief Judge Morrissey of all the district courts in the state issued guidance on how these were to be interpreted, how these orders were to be applied. Now, part of this was applying that reserve judgment across the state. So the way that we've been doing it here, they're now doing it everywhere. They're supposed to, at least. The other side of this, and there's two other important parts to this. One is that it formally stated that the landlord has a continuing duty to inform the court of any payments that have been made. So if the landlord gets $2,000 on a $2,000 judgment, they're supposed to tell the court, or they're supposed to tell their lawyer who tells the court. It is my understanding that I think that the court was reaching out to landlords or their counsel proactively before this order was issued. I'm not sure if they still are. I'm not sure the extent to which they were doing so, but I was happy to hear that they were reaching out on that. So that's part one. Landlord has to tell the court, have they paid? Are they there? How much have they paid? Again, this is important because not only can it avoid a judgment, in the event that it doesn't avoid a judgment, we want to make sure that the judgment is for the correct amount. So if the court found that the tenant owed $3,000 in, say, June, and then made $2,000 worth of payments, that judgment shouldn't be for $3,000. It should be for $1,000. This is important for the purposes of redemption. Avoiding judgments are important for the purposes of redemption, especially because many of these tenants have faced not one or two cases, but 3, 4, 5, or 6, depending on how long this has been going on. So that's the first part. The second part is very interesting. So normally, obtaining a writ is fairly simple. Once a judgment is entered, they have to wait a certain number of days, then they can apply to the court to get a writ, which they can use to schedule an eviction with the sheriff's office. However, what the court has elected to do is for any case where a judgment was reserved under either the CDC order or Governor Hogan's order, and a landlord requests a writ or a warrant of restitution, the clerk is going to set a request for a hearing within 21 days. They're going to set a hearing within 21 days. Notice will be sent to the parties, and then the decision that happens at that hearing will be sent to the parties as well. So this is additional notice. Parties will start, or tenants will be informed of writs, which is not normally the case. They would need to call the court. And they will be given the opportunity to come in and present payments that they've made or proof that they've left or judgments already entered, so the defenses will be limited, but they will have an opportunity to come in and say, actually, the county paid my rent. I don't expect this to be, there's judgments and judgments and judgments, primarily defaults, and we expect more to be entered once these expire. I don't expect the number of writs to match the number of judgments. And there's a couple reasons for that. The county has been making these payments, and that's going to address a lot of these cases. Some folks have relocated, either because they don't feel that they can get caught up, or they have relocated for other personal reasons, or I can talk about this very briefly. they've received a notice to vacate, which is teeing up for a tenant holding over case. I will address that very briefly in a minute. But the bottom line is that some folks aren't there anymore. And some landlords don't want to necessarily go through the process to get a writ for every single case they have. Or if somebody owes only $200 or $300 by this point, they're maybe not looking to get a writ at all. And that's a financial thing. Hearings require lawyers. Lawyers cost money unless you come to legal aid. So I'm expecting that this will lead to a more thoughtful strategy for landlords in moving forward on which cases they elect to proceed on. Although I will say this is not something that I have ever dealt with before. I don't think it's something that anybody's ever dealt with before, so I could be mistaken on that. Very briefly, I mentioned tenant holding over cases. So I understand, because I've spoken with some of you about this before, that there is some interest in this, and that has increased as a result of the COVID protections. So the general gist was that, the general question was, do landlords, are they issuing notices to vacate because they know that they can't get an eviction on a failure to pay rent case? I would say that is accurate. I don't have the data on hand. We are going through the dockets that we have access to, and I'm hoping that I can put together a comparison from last year's tenant holding over cases, or rather the number of tenant holding over cases on the non-summary docket, and compare them to the non-summary dockets that we're seeing now. Anecdotally, I've seen an increase. I have spoken with multiple tenants who are in on failure to pay rent cases who have brought in a notice to vacate as well, which has a pretty serious effect on the advice that I can give this person. Obviously, we do everything we can to avoid the failure to pay rent judgment, but a tenant holding over case is frequently an insurmountable obstacle, and they need to think about relocation rather than retaining their current housing. I will leave it at that for now. I would like to leave time for some questions, if anybody has any.
I don't see any questions right now. Why don't we go to DHCA next and then see if the two are linked. I hope DHCA worked out their technical issues. If you all could turn your video on and go ahead and get started. And just, again, time check. We're now going to aim at finishing a little after 12, and then the HHS committee will convene immediately after with the goal of trying to finish the HHS session by 12:45. So just for those watching at home. DHCA, you're on.
Good morning. Can you hear us now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Sorry for the technical difficulties this morning. Looks like we are almost in the afternoon. My name is Asim Nigam, Director of DHCA Montgomery County, and thank you very much to that joint committee session for holding this timely discussion. Can you unmute yourself? So, just to very briefly, we are collaborating.
Things were going well until you did whatever you just did.
Heard of an echo chamber, but
yeah.
Hello. Can you hear us now?
Okay. Now we can hear you again.
We won't touch. Yeah, I promise we will not touch any button. We are doing our collaboration with HHS, with our service providers, and some of them are represented over here, with other service providers like CASA, LEDC, HEP, Renters Alliance, with Montgomery College, MCPS, through our regional service centers, Office of Community Partnership, with space-based communities, with space-based distribution places, especially in East County. And we are doing whatever we can now to get the word out, both to the landlords and to the tenants, what resources are available, what the tenants' rights are, how they can reach out to us and to HHS and to the service providers from different, modes, whether it's social media, through ads on ride-on buses, through our webinars, which we are continuing to do with our service providers, and we have been doing webinars ourselves. We have done collaboration with AOBA to do landlord webinars. We are doing outreach to the landlords basically on a monthly basis, telling them, what is coming, what is available. That said, recently we sent out a communication to the landlords telling them that our rent cap of 1.4% is still valid because, as you know, the governor reaffirmed the state of emergency, including the health emergency, on July 12th. So we sent out a communication to all of the landlords, to 30,000 licensees in our database yesterday, just confirming to them that any rent increases during this emergency period is still capped at 1.4%, so that no one has any doubt. Because earlier there was some kind of confusion, although people heard that the emergency was lifted, but then it was lifted for certain executive orders, including the moratorium on the evictions, which will come off on August 15th. That said, thanks to the county executive and to the council for making certain funds available for our service organizations. So if I take a look at my FY20 budget, FY21, through EARTH money, $500,000 that was made available through HHS, through CARES Act, to date we have made all available $1.1 million. So, and that money is being put to the good use. As we are talking about evictions and outreach, our service providers are doing yeoman's job in terms of reaching out to the tenants. Earlier, I heard a question from Councilor Javando, how many apartment buildings may have reached out to. I can say that, through HHS and through our service providers, we have reached out to 100 apartment buildings in most at-risk communities. These are the communities where we have typically seen high eviction rates of COVID-19 cases or high unemployment rate. If you look at the county, the unemployment rate currently has come down to 5.6%. It was as high as 8 or 9% at one time last year. Of course, our unemployment rate is still about 2 percentage points higher than what Fairfax is seeing at this point. But hopefully, as we make our rental assistance available, as we make other assistance available to the businesses open up, and with all the assistance coming from the federal government, hopefully that will ease up the employment situation, and then hopefully we can serve a lot more people. Earlier I heard, numbers about 7,000 versus 8,000. If you take, 13% delinquency rate in the county, and let's say within our DSC's umbrella, let's say there are 100,000, rental units between multifamily and, common ownership communities and single family, it's about 13,000 households. So if we have received applications from, let's say, 7,700, applicants so far, and assuming everyone is eligible for the guidelines, at least we have 50%, maybe 50% there are delinquent tenants who have applied for these funds. So we have the monies available. We are reaching out to apartment owners, to tenants, and the landlords alike through whatever means. We have I have with me Frank Demaray and Rosie McRae Moody available here from Alta to talk about anything that they may be seeing from the Alta point of view. But if we get a call from 311, we try to process that call, in a short amount of time, and we try to put them in touch, whether it's with the HHS or the service provider, as the case may be. With that, I'm going to stop. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Chair Reamer to lead us off in this portion of the discussion. If he has any questions, I had a couple questions, but just wanted to see if he had any specific comments related specifically to GHCA.
No, why don't you please start, and I'll follow you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We had a question was raised earlier, I believe, by Councilmember Glass regarding some anecdotal information he and I've received as well, that there may be some property owners that are out there that have indicated they don't want to participate in the process, and then we heard from HHS that they're not experiencing those same issues, although they're incorporated in a different part of this overall process. I guess just generally speaking, Mr. Nagam, could you talk about, from your perspective, how landlords have been reacting? Have you primarily felt that they've been supportive? Have there been a larger number? We know there are chronic cases of some landlords who habitually we have challenges with, but have you seen that number increase, decrease? Could you just generally describe what the current environment is from the property owner standpoint based on your interactions and feedback?
I can just talk, generally, what we have been hearing. We have not been hearing any pushback from the landlords. When we did our webinar for the landlords, we had about 60 or 70, folks attend that webinar. And we provide information. We also provide information to major law firms in the county who represent majority of the property owners in the county. So in fact, one of the law firms, thanked us for providing that information. So we are not hearing from the landlords as such, thank you, but no thank you. We have to go ahead with the eviction, although it's their prerogative. I'm not sure, Rosie, if you have heard anything as such.
We find that the larger landlords want to participate in the process, and they want to know what they can do, how they can help push the process so it moves a little faster. They're anxious to participate with the HHS program and get the money. Some smaller landlords may be resistant to get the money. They just want to get the people out and get new tenants. But larger landlords are very anxious to participate in the process and want to know what it is they can do to help push the process along, what they can do to make it move a little faster, if anything.
That's helpful. And I guess just putting on my HHS hat, with regards to the pandemic and COVID, I know we're in terms of have property owners made changes based on COVID response in terms of HVAC systems that dated and were contributing to some of the environmental issues. And I know that the federal government and the county have actually provided some programs in place to help with some of those conversions. But in terms of the general environment within buildings, what are you hearing there? And then related, we've also heard an increase in security concerns within buildings that have arisen since the pandemic started. If you could just touch on any other trends that are unusual or different that we've experienced in these last 18 months directly as a result of all the changes and the challenges we've had in our community.
Sure, thank you.
Well, just with respect to the air handling, we did have, as part of the outreach landlord webinar, we had the team from the county speaking to the air handling guidelines. By and large, multifamily properties are not configured in a way that the changes, the filterings and other things would be immediately available. It would take major renovations to change. So we raised awareness, shared information, and there was an effort to connect buildings with that information, but there's not a movement in that front. The security issue is a critical issue in many communities. It was a town hall last evening hosted by the Renters Alliance and the police department, which is very active in a couple of the larger communities where they've had these issues, focused on their response. We were clear with all of the tenants, there were over 80 participating, that the county does have requirements on doors, security, locks, lighting, and that we are continuing to promote every tenant has the right option and obligation to connect with us if they have security concerns in the building, and we will be investigating.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And then my final question for now, and then nobody's chimed in yet, but colleagues, if you have questions, just let me know. Inflation's going up. The cost of building materials is literally twice what it was just a year ago. I know this, I can speak about this in the first person who's working on a little house project. The cost of lumber is literally twice as much as it was before. And I am concerned that as those prices rise, that, you know, in terms of general building maintenance, that will be a challenge and a burden. And it's just, are you hearing something similar from landlords and property owners? I know there's also been a challenge in just finding service workers to be able to address different issues in different buildings, because there's employment shortages across in just about every sector. But are you hearing any of that? Is that a concern that we should be thinking about?
Now, in terms of the price increases, you're absolutely right. The prices have gone up, especially lumber. You know, it went up to almost $1,600 per 1,000 board of wood per se, versus $350 pre-pandemic. That's come down quite a bit, you know, to more like $700. That being said, it's still high from pre-pandemic levels. The cost of you know, steel and, you know, concrete has gone up. That being said, in terms of our multifamily projects, at least we have not heard so far that they are under distress in terms of, you know, their reserves of financial resources or actually finding the contractor, because more often than not, most of the big landlords, they have their own employees for maintenance, or they have, you know, contracts with some, you know, good contracting companies. So, but it's a general, you know, belief, and it's true to a large extent. It's difficult to find contractors right now because, you know, it's difficult to find a qualified contractor on a specific job per se. But at least we are not seeing it in a rampant mode at this point.
Terrific. Those are all the questions that I had. I don't see any of my colleagues chiming in at this point. And so I guess I'll end with the one question I had for everybody on the call. We're meeting again with Senator Cardin tomorrow, so any feedback that any of you would like to provide now in a message that we can deliver to him and to our federal partners that may be helpful in some way to your work. And I'll start with HHS.
So I can chime in. I think the first thing would be, please don't change the terms on us again. You know, the constant changing makes it really challenging. The other thing I would note is in one of the changes that just came out on June 30th was a substantial change to information that needs to be reported. And at this point, we are preparing to have to spend hours doing that manually based on how our system is set up. And Treasury has still not released the template for that report, which is due on July 29th. So any leverage that he might have to either extend that deadline or to have them revert back to their previous reporting, I mean, that is going to be a tremendous amount of time where we could otherwise be reviewing and approving cases that we're going to have to divert staff to doing. You know, as we mentioned, we are confident that we are on track for the spending deadlines. You know, and so just as long as they kind of let us keep moving and let us keep focusing on being able to put that money out versus diverting our attention to reconfiguring an application, retraining staff, or having to, you know, the immense change to the reporting, any of that would be extremely helpful from our end.
Thank you. That is really helpful. We're making a note of that. We'll make sure that's added to the questions or comments to the Senator tomorrow. DHCA, was there anything you would like for us to mention to the Senator from a regulatory standpoint or funding that might be helpful?
Well, I would say that, you know, based on our experience, to request that to keep the requirements as light as possible, to allow the tenants to self-certify their income, not to look for, you know, tax returns or, you know, other, you know, documentation, which may be onerous. Yes, you know, these are federal dollars, so you do have to make sure that we are meeting our guidelines. But, you know, getting to the tax returns, especially when a person doesn't have a job or, has going through, a lot of trauma, it's very difficult to obtain those kind of documentation. And then, it may appear that we may have enough money for the rental assistance, but we're in the long haul. So this will be a 3, 4, 5-year recovery period. So we just hope that, the federal government provides more money for the rental assistance for the out years once we go through this, rental assistance at this point.
Terrific. Mr. Vitale or Captain Lewis, was there anything that you wanted to add from a federal perspective that might be helpful to you all in your work?
I'd just like to point out this is something that I think a lot of folks think of as a legal crisis, and it is primarily a health and poverty issue. Legal services, legal aid, and HPRP and CASA, we've worked hard, and I think that we've been effective in buying folks as much time as we can. But ultimately, this is a solution that is going to require long-term solution, or a problem that's going to require long-term solutions. And I would hope that the federal government is able to continue to work with DHHS and our other local partners here to make sure that there is enough aid and that it can get out quickly, because unfortunately we are limited in exactly how much time we can buy.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That was really well said. Captain Lewis, anything you wanted to add?
Nothing from the sheriff's office at this point. Okay.
Great. Well, this has been extremely informative. Ms. McMillan, was there anything else that you wanted to make sure we covered that we haven't covered?
I think we're good, and we'll just make sure the council members get the weekly information that's in the Pulse report so that you can follow the progress.
Okay, and Dr. Kroll has his hand up, and Chair Reamer would like to say something as well. So why don't we go to Chair Reamer? Well, actually, Dr. Kroll followed by Chair Reamer.
I give Chair Reamer the last word on this. I just wanted to say that as you talk to the to Senator Cardin, I think the message is that as we think about future funding around this, that we think about ways of de-siloing the funding, so that because there are other health needs and human service needs and kinds of needs that they need, that the more we can create additional supports and through things like ARPA that have some flexibility to them, that will help our residents and help folks to get back on their feet.
Terrific. Thank you for that. Chair Reamer, you get the last word.
Okay, thanks. I'm sure you discussed this, but I just wanted to state, if there is support needed for the nonprofits that we are partnering with for the legal interventions and supports, please let us know. If you're a nonprofit partner doing this work, we want to make sure you have adequate funding for this year. And, please let us know if that's not the case. So, thank you for this discussion. It's been very helpful, and look forward to continuing it as we go.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. So this joint HHS and PHED committee session is now adjourned. So thank you all so much for participating. And we will now convene as the HHS committee, and our colleagues in PHED are more than welcome to stay if they'd like to. But I suspect you guys have other stuff you need to do.
It's okay to have questions, like, can the vaccines give you COVID-19?